Undefeated boxer forced a black girl to fight. The ending shocked millions. The lights of the arena burned brighter than the sun itself. Every corner of the massive stadium pulsed with energy. Music thumped from the speakers, neon lights flickered across the crowd, and the air smelled of sweat, popcorn, and anticipation. Thousands of faces filled the seats, their voices clashing into one deafening roar. This wasn't just another fight night. It was a spectacle. At the center of it all stood the woman the world had come to see, the reigning champion. She was a towering figure, sculpted from years of training, her muscles glistening beneath the spotlights. Her uniform, a custom set of red, white, and blue shorts, clung proudly to her frame as if declaring her ownership of the ring. Every step she took shook with arrogance. She raised her fists, flexing for the cameras, and the crowd erupted. Her smile wasn't the warm smile of an athlete. It was the smug grin of someone who knew the world adored her, someone who believed she was untouchable. But tonight, her opponent wasn't the professional fighter everyone had expected. No. Tonight, she had decided to turn her dominance into theater. She didn't want a fair fight. She wanted humiliation. And her eyes had already picked a target. Sitting quietly in the front rows was a young black girl. She couldn't have been older than 19. Her hair was tied back into a simple bun, her outfit plain. She wasn't here to perform, she was just a spectator. She had saved up to see this fight, eager to learn from the best, because boxing wasn't just a sport to her, it was a dream she carried silently in her heart. But that dream was about to be twisted into something else entirely. The champion pointed directly at her. Cameras turned. Security, at first confused, moved closer. Then the announcement came through the booming microphone. The champion was challenging this girl to step into the ring. Not as a fighter, not as a peer, but as a prop in her cruel little show. The crowd roared with laughter and excitement. They thought it was brilliant entertainment. A champion against a random nobody. A mismatch so extreme it could only be funny. People began to chant, clapping their hands, urging the girl forward. The young girl froze. Her chest tightened, her heart pounded against her ribs, and her palms grew slick with sweat. This couldn't be real. She hadn't trained for this. She wasn't dressed for this. She wasn't ready for this. And yet the cameras were already zooming in on her face, catching every flicker of fear. She tried to shake her head, tried to refuse, but the pressure was unbearable. The stadium was alive with jeers and chants, drowning her in humiliation before she had even moved. Her friends nudged her, strangers shouted at her, and in a blur of confusion, she found herself being ushered through the barricade, onto the steps, and into the blinding light of the ring. The champion towered above her, grinning wide. The difference between them was staggering. One looked like a polished warrior, the other, like a child caught in headlights. As the referee reluctantly handed her borrowed gloves, the girl realized what was happening. She wasn't here to fight. She was here to be laughed at. But somewhere, buried deep inside her trembling chest, something else stirred. Something quiet. Something waiting. The bell hadn't rung yet, but the humiliation was already underway. The champion paraded around her, flexing her bulging arms, bowing sarcastically, waving to the crowd as if to say, "Watch how easily I crush her." The young girl tried to steady her breathing, her gloves heavy and awkward on her hands. She wasn't dressed for combat. Her sneakers slipped slightly on the canvas, and her oversized borrowed jersey hung awkwardly, almost mocking her appearance. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every detail of her discomfort. The image was beamed onto giant screens around the stadium, and laughter rippled through the audience. The bell rang. But instead of launching into real strikes, the champion began a performance. She jabbed lightly, barely grazing the girl's chin, exaggerating the movement to make it look like a crushing blow. She shoved her shoulder gently, sending her stumbling back clumsily, and then raised her hands to the crowd, mocking applause. Every move was designed not to defeat, but to ridicule. The audience howled. Some whistled, some pointed, some doubled over in laughter. The girl could feel every sound piercing her skin like needles. Her cheeks burned with shame, her stomach knotted, her mind screamed at her to run. But there was no escape. The cameras were locked on her, the world was watching, and she was trapped in a nightmare she hadn't chosen. The champion leaned in close at one point, whispering something cruel before stepping back and flexing her arms again. She danced around her, pretending to yawn, pretending to be bored, treating the entire fight as a comedy routine. And the worst part? The crowd loved it. For the young girl, each second felt like an eternity. Her arms ached from holding her guard, Her legs trembled under the weight of humiliation. Tears burned at the edges of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of them. Not while they were laughing. And yet, something was shifting. The sting of humiliation, the roar of mockery, the smug smirk plastered on her opponent's face, it all began to blur into something else. Her breathing, once frantic, slowed. Her fists, once shaky, began to tighten. She felt the burn of anger rising, mixing with a strange, unexpected clarity. She remembered the hours in the small community gym, the time she had shadowboxed in front of cracked mirrors, the way her coach had told her, "One day, you'll surprise the world." And for the first time that night, she raised her eyes, not with shame, but with a fire that no one had expected. Her humiliation wasn't breaking her. It was transforming her. The third round of mockery had just begun. The champion strutted across the ring like a lioness circling trapped prey. Her gloves barely raised. Her laughter echoing through the microphone that picked up every breath. She was no longer fighting. She was performing. And the crowd devoured every moment. The young girl, however, stood differently now. Her shoulders still sagged with the weight of embarrassment, but her eyes told a different story. Where once there had been shame, there was now focus, an intensity that slipped unnoticed by most. Only a few sharp-eyed spectators caught the subtle shift. The champion, drunk on arrogance, decided to end the show with an extra flourish. She raised her gloves dramatically, motioning as if she would unleash a powerful combination, the kind that had knocked out seasoned fighters in seconds. The audience cheered wildly, eager to see the little girl crumble. But then, something unexpected happened. As the champion lunged forward, throwing a lazy jab meant only to tease, the young girl's body reacted with a precision born not of chance, but of hidden discipline. In one fluid motion, she slipped the punch, her torso twisting just enough, her head snapping aside, and before the champion could even register the miss, a sharp right hand fired from the girl's hip, connecting cleanly with the champion's jaw. The sound was deafening, not because the punch was so loud, but because the stadium fell into absolute silence. For a split second, the world stopped. The champion's head snapped back. Her eyes widened in disbelief, and she stumbled 2 steps to the side. Her smirk was gone. Her arrogance shattered. And in that frozen moment, the laughter of thousands of voices turned into stunned gasps. The cameras caught everything, the perfect technique, the explosive power, the raw determination in the girl's eyes. What had been set up as a cruel joke had transformed in an instant into something entirely different. The champion touched her jaw with gloved fingers, stunned. She had expected fear, weakness, surrender. Instead, she had been struck by a girl who moved with the precision of someone who belonged in the ring, someone who had trained, someone who wasn't there to be humiliated, but to fight. And the crowd. The crowd didn't know what to do. Half of them erupted into cheers, shocked by the unexpected twist. The other half sat in stunned silence, their laughter caught in their throats, unable to process what they had just seen. The big screens replayed the moment again and again, the slip, the punch, the stumble. With each replay, the arena's energy shifted from mockery to awe. The young girl stood tall now, her chest rising and falling steadily. Her gloves no longer trembled. Her eyes no longer darted nervously. She wasn't the victim anymore. The champion regained her balance. Her face flushed red, not from the punch, but from the humiliation she had intended to inflict, now turned against her. She snarled, shaking out her arms, trying to play it off. But deep down she knew the truth. She had underestimated her opponent. And that was her first mistake. For the first time in the night, the champion raised her gloves with seriousness. No more playing. No more mocking. Now, she wanted a fight. And for the first time in the night, the young black girl smiled, not a smile of arrogance, but of quiet determination. The game had changed. The predator had just realized her prey had claws. The silence after the shocking punch didn't last long. It shattered under the roar of the crowd, their voices bouncing off the walls of the arena like thunder. The champion clenched her jaw, no longer smirking, no longer treating the fight as a show. Her gloves came up high, her stance sharp, her eyes burning with something dangerous, rage. The young black girl did not flinch. She met that rage with calm, her breathing steady, her gaze unwavering. For the first time since stepping into the ring, she looked like she belonged there, not as a pawn in someone else's cruel joke, but as a fighter with her own destiny. The bell rang again, signaling the next round. The champion came forward like a storm. No more laziness, no more taunting footwork. Every punch she threw now carried the weight of her pride, the fury of being embarrassed before her fans. She unleashed combinations with lightning speed, jabs snapping, hooks swinging, uppercuts tearing through the air. But the young girl was no longer the timid maid they had expected her to be. Her body moved with precision, honed through years of practice no one had cared to see. She slipped punches with graceful bends of her waist, blocked strikes with sharp reflexes, and countered with quick jabs that snapped the champion's head back. The arena was electric. Each time the champion landed a heavy blow, the crowd gasped, believing it might be the end. But each time the young girl answered with speed and accuracy, the crowd erupted, torn between disbelief and exhilaration. The laughter that once filled the air had transformed into cheers, shouts, and chants for the underdog who refused to bow down. Still, the champion was relentless. She pressed forward, using her size, her strength, her years of experience. Her fists slammed into the girl's guard, her gloves bruising ribs, her sheer power threatening to crush the will of her smaller opponent. The sound of leather meeting flesh echoed like gunfire. The girl staggered under a heavy cross to the body, her knees buckling slightly. The crowd groaned, thinking it was over. But then, she stood tall again, her chin lifted, eyes blazing with something the champion couldn't match. Not arrogance, not rage, but resolve. And that resolve drove her forward. She danced around the ring, her footwork light and quick, her gloves snapping out like strikes of lightning. 1-2. Step back. Hook. Slip. Counter. Her movements were clean, efficient, the kind of technique that came from discipline and hunger, not privilege. She wasn't fighting just to survive. She was fighting to prove that she was worthy, that she belonged, that her voice, her strength, her existence mattered. The crowd felt it. What had begun as a cruel spectacle had become something far greater. The arena buzzed with energy, as though every spectator had become part of the fight, their cheers pushing the girl forward, their disbelief melting into admiration. And for the first time, the champion's confidence wavered. Her punches slowed. Her breathing grew heavier. Her movements became less sharp. The young girl, on the other hand, seemed to grow stronger with every exchange. Each strike she landed fueled her fire. Each blow she absorbed made her more determined. Her heart pounded not with fear, but with courage. The champion swung a desperate right hook, wide and powerful, but the girl ducked beneath it. In that split-second opening, she drove her fist upward, a sharp, snapping uppercut that connected with brutal precision. The champion's head snapped back once again, sweat spraying under the lights. The arena erupted into chaos. The crowd was no longer mocking, no longer laughing. They were on their feet, screaming, shouting, living every second of the fight. The little black girl, the one meant to be humiliated, had turned the ring into her stage. The bell rang, ending the round. Both fighters returned to their corners, but the energy in the room was undeniable. The champion sat heavily, sweat dripping, eyes wide with disbelief. She had underestimated her opponent, and it had cost her dearly. The young girl stood tall in her corner, chest heaving, but her spirit unbroken. She glanced across the ring, her eyes meeting those of her rival. No fear, no shame, only fire. The fight was no longer about humiliation. It was no longer about entertainment. It was about respect, and the world would soon find out who truly deserved it. The air inside the arena was heavy, thick with tension. Every face in the crowd leaned forward, every cheer hushed into nervous anticipation. The champion had built her career on dominance, on never giving her opponents even a glimpse of hope. But tonight, under the bright lights and the deafening noise, she looked human, shaken, weary, vulnerable. The young black girl stood across from her, shoulders square, her chest rising and falling with deep, steady breaths. Her gloves trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer exhaustion of pouring every ounce of strength into proving herself. Sweat glistened across her skin, but her eyes burned with an unshakable fire. The bell rang for the final round. The champion charged forward, desperate, her pride demanding victory. Her fists cut through the air, heavy with frustration, hammering toward the girl's guard. Each blow landed like thunder, rattling the girl's arms, bruising her ribs. The audience gasped with every strike, unsure if she could endure. But she did. Every time the champion tried to crush her, the girl answered, not with fear, but with precision. Her counters were crisp, sharp, and perfectly timed. She moved with the rhythm of someone who had been underestimated her whole life, and had learned to turn that underestimation into strength. The champion roared, throwing a wild left hook meant to end the fight. But the girl ducked low, pivoted on her heel, and unleashed a blistering right hand. It was fast, clean, and devastating. The glove connected with the champion's jaw. Time seemed to stop. The sound of the impact echoed louder than the crowd. The champion's head snapped back, her body stiffened, and for a heartbeat, the arena fell into silence. Every eye locked onto her as she staggered, arms flailing to catch balance. Then, slowly, her knees buckled. The undefeated champion crumbled to the canvas. The arena exploded. The roar was deafening, waves of disbelief and or crashing from every direction. Some fans shouted in joy, others screamed in shock. But no one remained seated. The moment had electrified the entire room, shaking the foundation of everything they thought they knew about the fight. The referee stepped in, counting. The champion lay still, her pride shattered, her reign undone. The young girl stood frozen for a moment, staring at what she had just done. Then, her knees wobbled, not from weakness, but from the overwhelming realization of victory. She had done it. The underdog. The maid. The one they laughed at, mocked, and underestimated. She had risen to meet the champion on her own ground, and triumphed. Her gloves dropped to her sides as tears welled in her eyes. Not tears of sorrow, but of release. Years of struggle, years of invisibility, years of being told she wasn't enough. All of it had led to this moment. And the world was watching. The referee raised her hand high, declaring her the winner. The arena shook with applause, chants, and cries that drowned out everything else. Those who had laughed now cheered. Those who had mocked now stood in awe. But more powerful than the victory itself was the silence that followed inside each spectator's mind. A silence filled with questions they could not escape. Why had they doubted her? Why had they assumed she was less? Why had her skin, her job, her status blinded them to her strength? This was no longer just a fight. It was a lesson. This was no longer just a fight. It was a lesson. The young black girl had stepped into the ring as a pawn in someone else's cruel game, but she had walked out a champion, not only in boxing, but in spirit. Her victory became a symbol, a moment bigger than herself, a reminder that dignity cannot be mocked, and greatness cannot be denied. And as the arena lights dimmed and the echoes of the crowd faded, one truth lingered in the air like smoke after fire. Respect is not given. It is earned. And tonight, she had claimed it forever.